far. We had a problem last night with technology. It was, I think, HDMI versus VGA or something like that. I don't know enough about it, but they didn't get along at all, so had to work hard to get the projector to work. Oh, I understand one of the criticisms was Hinduism has 330 million gods. So we sing that, right? Mupatu Mukodi Deva Kumangalam in one of our songs. 33 crore in Sanskrit. 10 million. It's very hard. Is anyone good at counting in lakhs and crores? Lakhs and crores? You can do that? Got a few. 100,000 and 10 million instead of 100,000 and 1 million. It's a different system, so it's confusing. So 330 million gods, Mupatu Mukodi Devatum. And somebody else only has one god, right? And we have 330 million. Well, of course, that's not what it means. Lots of scriptures. Cutting out. Lots of scriptures that explain it in detail, but the simplest way of explaining it is, well, that's the number of residents in the highest inner world. Roughly speaking. They didn't take a census, I'm sure. But in other words, there's lots of beings, rishis of the past that have evolved, and different kind of minor gods. You know, that's the population of the highest inner world at that point in time, at least. Maybe more now, that would be worse, right? 404. So, the population is not who we worship. Hindus all worship a one supreme being. That's something we can be very strong on. Truth is one. Sages describe it variously, right? That's what it says. So I like to say, Hindus all worship a one supreme being. We just don't agree on the name and the nature. To some it's Shiva, to some it's Vishnu, to some it's Brahman. You know, we don't agree on the name. Others say God incarnates on earth as an avatar. Others say, no, he doesn't do that. No, we don't agree on the nature, and we don't agree on the name. But that's fine, we're not supposed to agree. In Hinduism, there's no need to agree. If there's a billion Hindus, we can have a billion philosophies. There's no need consensus in the Hindu approach. Then the other one is we're worshiping stones, right? That's the good one. So I was reminded by one of the devotees that Gurudeva's analogy is to the telephone. You talk into the phone, but you're not, there's something at the other end of the phone, right? You're not just talking to the phone all day. And used to be, you could tell who was schizophrenic. People would be walking down the street talking to themselves. But now most people walking down the street are talking to the cell phone, not to the self. So, yeah, it looks like they're talking to themselves if you're not careful. Particularly when it's, is that called Bluetooth? Particularly when it's Bluetooth. There's nothing you can see, they're just talking. So there's somebody at the other end of the phone, that's the point. Just like there's somebody at the other end of the consecrated stone or the consecrated statue. Consecration, called prana pratishta, takes place in a temple during Kumbhabhishekam, and it's right toward the end before they put the deity into the shrine and make it such that you can't touch it. As long as you can touch it as a devotee, you know that hasn't taken place in an agamic temple. You, for example, they let you oil it in some Kumbhabhishekam ceremonies, and then the next day you can't touch it. So you can tell, after you can't touch it, it's had a prana pratishta. Life has been infused. Prana, life has been infused. pratishta into it. And then it becomes like a telephone. There's somebody at the other end. Or we could say what's been infused into it is the connection to the deity in the inner world. So that when you're praying to it, now there's someone at the other end, just like, for example, we come here and you have your smartphone, but it doesn't work because of the SIM card. So what you have to do, you have to put in the Malaysian SIM card, then it works. You can talk to people. But till you put in the Malaysian SIM card, mine is just an alarm clock at the moment. I don't use it for a SIM card. So you have to put in the SIM card, which is the same as saying Prana Pratishta. It has to be plugged in to a network, so there's someone at the other end. So like that, there's an intelligent answer for each question, and the answer needs to be crafted so it matches the person you're talking to and matches their understanding of religion. You're not trying to insult them or argue with them. You're trying to show them that in your opinion, Hinduism is superior for you to what they're talking about. Doesn't have to be superior to them, but as far as you're concerned, you've got the religion that's right for you, and you're not movable. I'll tell you a story about, some of you have heard it, in Texas. Texas is part of the U.S. that's getting more and more Hindu every year. The Hindus coming from abroad like the warmth. It's generally warm all year. And they have lots of Hindus there working in medicine and in IT, particularly in chip design and manufacturing. But still, it's very strongly Christian evangelical. So sometimes I run into Hindus who think that Christianity is a one thing, and Hinduism is all splintered. But I think the number is Christianity has 33,000 denominations, according to the Christian Encyclopedia. It's their own compilation. Christian Encyclopedia says we have 33,000 different ways of looking at Christianity, and none of us agree. So it makes Hinduism look like fewer branches. But the point is, a group like the Catholics is very conservative. They don't go out and proselytize. But evangelicals, such as the Baptists, that's what they think is the most important thing to do. Rather than go to church, they go out and evangelize and try and convert someone. It's really a high priority in their religious disciplines. So that's fine, but this was happening in school in the third, we call it the third grade, so that's age 8. One of the Christian boys was telling the Hindu boy that he was going to go to hell because he didn't believe a certain way. So the boy told his father got upset, and the father asked me in a satsang. Well, you're in Texas, you have to deal with this. The problem is the boy doesn't have an answer. You need an answer that's appropriate for an 8-year-old. So the answer I suggested was, well, in Christianity, lots of people go to hell, but in Hinduism, eventually everyone goes to heaven. So which would you prefer? Religion with chance you'll go to hell, or religion where you're guaranteed a place in heaven? I thought that was a good answer for a 8-year-old. So likewise, any question, you can craft an intelligent answer based upon the knowledge of the person and the age of the person you're dealing with. One of the key differences in Hinduism is its religion. So it wants to keep cutting out. It's a religion that required multiple lifetimes to accomplish, not a one lifetime experience. Why is that? So Gurudeva gives a beautiful analogy in the Master Course Trilogy, the lotus flower. You probably all remember that, how it starts in the mud, grows a shoot through the water, comes up with a bud, and then finally the bud blossoms. So that's the analogy for spiritual unfoldment. And what is it in us that goes through that process? It's called the Anandamaya Kosha. The sheath of the soul actually goes through a maturing process. Just like it starts as a seed in the mud, grows a stem, grows a bud, and then the bud blossoms. So the blossoming of the bud represents living in higher consciousness while we're here on earth. Not experiencing any anger, any fear, any jealousy, being a creative person, being a compassionate person, having a sense of divinity within everyone, even if they don't like you. That's higher consciousness, and that's what we're striving for. And that takes many lifetimes to develop. And what develops it? Everyone knows the answer. How do we make spiritual progress? Practice, yes. Practice. Just like singing, dancing, playing a musical instrument, there's no substitution for daily practice. And as we know in all of the endeavors, we have to practice for many, many years before we're any good at all. It's a very slow process. Well, spiritual progress is like that, but it's even slower. We have to practice for many, many lifetimes. So that's one aspect of Hinduism. The other aspect is that you're already God. So that sounds like a contradiction. I'll explain it in a second. How can we be maturing and how can we already be God at the same time, right? Gurudeva explains it in terms of the soul body, or Anandamaya Kosha, and the essence of the soul, or the nucleus of the soul. So the nucleus of the soul never changes, whereas the soul body is constantly maturing. So part of us is maturing, and part of us is already God. In what way are we already God? Well, God is omnipresent consciousness and the transcendent source of that consciousness. And that's what comprises the nucleus of the soul. And we're already that. Because it never changes. We're already omnipresent consciousness and the transcendent source of that consciousness. But it's located at a depth or an inner place which most people can't access. It's hidden, very well hidden from us. And the analogy I use is the pond of water. Most of you have heard that one, remember? It's like you have gold nuggets at the bottom of a pond of water. The water is muddy and the surface has ripples. So when we look down, we can't see the gold nuggets that are always there, right? But so the challenge is we have to get rid of the ripples. What the ripples represent, they represent our thoughts. We can't quiet our thoughts. So we have to learn to be able to quiet our thoughts. Sumairu, be still. We have to master that. But once we quiet our thoughts and we look down, what do we see? Muddy water. Not very inspiring. So some people give up at that time. All the unresolved issues of their past and growing up. All the outstanding disagreements with others in this life that they haven't resolved. That's the mud sitting down there. We take a look at it and we say, let's watch television. But a few people say, okay, well, let's get rid of this mud. I'm committed to the process here. So that's what we do sadhana for, and that's one of the big reasons we go to the temple. It's the simplest answer when children ask, why do we go to the temple? It's to get rid of the mud, which in Sanskrit means chitta shuddhi, purification of the mind, chitta shuddhi. That's why we go to the temple. The energies, the blessings of the deity clear out the mud slow by slow. Very simple process, and that's why we are supposed to go at least once a week. So if we get rid of the mud, then we're on the top, the water is still, there's no mud, we look down, what do we see? We see the gold nuggets. Congratulations. To do that, you've had to mature your soul body in the same. The two things act together, ability to see and the maturing of the body, which takes many lives. So one of the ways Paramaguru Yogaswami liked to explain that, he loved to talk about it, to him it was just the state of mind he lived in all the time. He was omnipresent. He could even do things through omnipresence. Project himself into different places, initiate people, things like that. So if we have a little time we could tell a few stories, but one of the stories is he had the Canadian ambassador to Sri Lanka was visiting with his wife and 2 children. And the ambassador had some metaphysical training. And so Yogaswami asked the children, how old are you? One child said, I'm 7. Yogaswami said, I'm the same age as you. Then he asked the other child, how old are you? And the other child said, I'm age 11. And Yogaswami said, I'm the same age as you. Of course, the children couldn't understand, right? How can you be 7 years old and 11 years old, and there you are sitting there looking like the person's grandfather? Didn't make sense to the children, but the Canadian ambassador was more philosophical and he thought about it and wrote it down, and it's in our book, Guru Chronicles, and it says, after having thought about it, I came to the conclusion that there's something in all of us that the same age. So it's in every person, whether they're 7 years old, 11 years old, or they're Yogaswami, who was probably in his late 80s at that point. There's something in every one of us that's the same age. Well, what age could it be if it's the same in everyone? It has to be eternal. Has to be something that's existed always. That's the only age it could be. So the age of eternity is within every one of us. Or said another way, there's something inside of us that's always been the same at the beginning of creation and at the end of creation. It's unchanging. So there's this unchanging consciousness that doesn't evolve. So we're not used to something that doesn't change or evolve. But it's inside of us. It's unchanging consciousness. So therefore, we're all the same age. So I'm going on, I'm one of our, I'm in the Rishipati community, being almost 77 myself. Well, there's 3 of us here. 2 formal Rishipatis and 1 Rishi Swami. Almost 77, but part of me is the same age as the other Rishipatis, as everyone else here. That's the point. We're all of the same age, and that's another way of describing this omnipresent consciousness that's inside of all of us. So Hinduism wants us to experience that. And in fact, if we don't experience it, we keep coming back. We keep reincarnating. There's a quote in the Mundaka Upanishad about that, which I won't tell the whole story, but basically someone has great punyam for all the charitable deeds they've done in this life, so they go to heaven. And then what happens? They stay there for a while, and their punyam runs out. It's like if you're staying in a hotel and you max out your credit card, you can't stay there anymore, right? You have to leave. So they have to leave and come back. So punyam by itself isn't enough to keep you in heaven permanently. That's the monistic or Advaita point of view of the Upanishads. Because we haven't realized God within. We have to keep going. Punyam's good. It allows us to stay in heaven. Punyam is good. It allows us to live without a lot of agitation from the lower states of mind, which we don't want to be agitated. But it's not enough. We have to come back, mature our soul body to the point where the surface of the water is still, there's no mud, and we find the gold nuggets, and then it's not enough just to do that once, we have to do it again and again. As Gurudeva says in the Master Course, it's probably hard to understand what he's saying, but realization of the self isn't a one-time thing. I've talked to some people who think that. They've had deep experiences in meditation. I say, well, what happened? I had a deep experience and now I'm just kind of ordinary again, 5 or 10 years later. And I said, well, you have to repeat it. And if you succeed in repeating it, what do you have to do again? You have to repeat it. And if you exceed, etc., you have to keep repeating that state of consciousness and learn to live in it all the time. That's the point. We need to be free from anger, free from fear, free from jealousy, free from agitation, steady, calm, content, creative, seeing the divine in everyone. That needs to be our daily consciousness. So we're all working toward that. Sometimes individuals get discouraged at the imperfections they find in themselves. And I tell them, well, if you were perfect, you wouldn't have been born in the first place. Very simple, right? No one who's perfect is born. No, there are perfect people, but they didn't get reborn. That's another name for not getting reborn or living among the 330 million population there. You're perfect. So you don't have to come back. There's nothing more to do. Do we call it, what is the name of the second school we go to? Secondary school? Would that be the name of it? Secondary school would be okay. Once you complete secondary school and you do a few years of college as well, they let you back into secondary school? Of course not. They said, you know everything we teach. You're already advanced. So that's like life on earth. Life is like secondary school. Once you finished it and you've gone a little further, there's no reason to come back. Reincarnation won't bring you back because you've done everything there is to do. Just like going to secondary school and graduating successfully. You've done everything. There's no if you came back, what would you do? You know all the answers. The teacher would chase you away. Say, you don't belong here. How'd you get back? So that's the idea of Hinduism. It's a slow spiritual progress over many lives that takes us into higher and higher states of consciousness. And that's what I like to focus on for individuals who have a sense of what states of consciousness means. Which of course all of you are familiar with Gurudeva's teachings, so you have some idea of what higher states of consciousness means, but lots of people don't have a sense of that. But it's about higher states of consciousness, and I have a quote on that, see if I can paraphrase myself. The goal in Hinduism isn't related to the future. In other words, in some religions, you're doing things now so at the end of life you can go to heaven. You're not concerned about what's going on now, you're concerned about the end of life. I got to get to heaven, so I'm doing this now. So Hinduism's not concerned about the future. It's not concerned about the past. It's concerned about the present. And what about the present? It's concerned about living in as high a state of consciousness in the present as you can, every moment. So right now, 5 minutes from now, 10 minutes from now, we're trying to live in as high a state of consciousness as possible. That's what Hinduism is about. Living in the present